united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this beautiful location of the Arts and History Museum in Brussels. I'm a Belgian native, so I'm very proud to welcome you in this specific museum. My name is Barbara Moens. I am our chief EU correspondent here at Politico. And you are watching Politico Live, the live extension of Politico's unbiased journalism. I walked here from the European Council, which, as many of you probably know, has extended a little bit longer than we had all anticipated, including the European leaders. There is a plus side to that. It means that we always say in Brussels that our events are very timely. In this case, it's actually true, as European leaders have been discussing the subject of today's discussion, the future of the EU's industrial policy and competitiveness. The downside is that our star guest, Enrico Letta, is still there doing a press conference, so we're hoping to have him here as soon as possible. In the meanwhile, we are having a panel with three esteemed MEPs who are very active on this topic in the European Parliament. But first things first, some housekeeping remarks. I would like to thank our partner, BMW, for making this event possible, as well as our fantastic Politico Live team. We want to make this event as interactive as possible. You can participate by tweeting about it at Live Politico and asking questions through Slido, using the hashtag #IndustrialPolicyEU, or scanning the QR code on the screen. Please state your name and organization for transparency reasons, so I can then use those questions to give to our MEPs. You can also vote on the following poll on Slido. What should be the top priority to boost Europe's industrial competitiveness in the next mandate? A question that we will also address to our MEPs. We will now hear some opening remarks from our partner, Jochen Goller, member of the Board of Management of BMW Group.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the BMW Group, I would like to welcome you to today's event. Allow me to start by underlining the importance of the report that Professor Letta just presented to the EU Council. The single market is an ace up our sleeves in an increasingly geopolitical and competitive world. The EU's single market, while not being as populated as India's or China's, is a global benchmark in terms of purchasing power, productivity, rule of law, and regulatory stability. The EU's single market provides the level of scale required to bolster innovation and productivity and gives new market entrants a strong basis to fuel Europe's future growth. Its creation has laid the foundation for the political stability and economic prosperity that we all cherish here in Europe today. Europe's unique single market is closely linked to Europe's competitiveness. A new industry policy that aims to strengthen both should reflect three important perspectives. First, European industrial champions are the backbone of European research and development. We are able to develop the technologies required to keep a competitive edge in the global technology race and bring them to market. This is the model that has made Europe and its single market successful, and we stand ready to continue to drive Europe's economic growth. This will continue to foster a network of highly innovative academic institutions, as well as small and medium enterprises. Speaking from an industrial perspective that I know very well from my own experience in numerous markets, the European automotive industry remains very strong in our home market. The BMW Group is the perfect example that a European-rooted company can be a leader in the transformation of an industry and draw considerable growth potential from the ramp-up of electric vehicles. And this transformation is not only related to new cars, but about crafting new value chains and building up a new infrastructure. For example, through Ionity, we will provide more than 7,000 high-performance charging stations by 2025 across Europe. This rapid rollout is enabled by the BMW Group and its partners, investing more than 700 million euro into this vital enabling technology. Clearly, having an EU-wide CO2 fleet regulation applying to 27 member states is one thing, but we also require a single EU market in terms of enabling conditions. Second, it's all about investing and scaling. Europe needs a lot of funding for its transformation to a digital and circular economy. Private funding will be key. Private funding will come to a large extent from the industry. Through our investments, we will lead the industry on a pathway towards decarbonization of the complete value chain. We believe that economic security and climate resilience must be addressed through an integrated approach. Enabling a local energy transition and getting the grid ready for cutting-edge technologies, such as vehicle-to-grid, need to be the focus. Circular economy is another key enabler. Industrialization of a circular economy is key. Throughout our digital technology platform, Catena X, we have laid the digital foundation to further reduce CO2 along the value chain and enable raw materials to be recycled and reprocessed. With this, we are addressing both environmental and social concerns in our supply chain, while continuously driving decarbonization of materials. Third, we will surely all agree that nothing is more unpredictable than a successful implementation of innovation and its market adoption. Technology openness was and will be the key element for Europe's competitiveness. Throughout my own career, I've spent considerable time in China. I've had the opportunity to work with the talented locals and to experience the power of Chinese innovation firsthand. One of the key strengths of the Chinese economy is its vast home market. Yet the other is a long-term strategic, but at the same time very pragmatic approach to industry policy. This is, by the way, very similar to the US. We should learn from that and strengthen Europe's competitiveness while strengthening our single market in a bold, fast, and pragmatic manner. In my opinion, that also must be the imperative for our future European industry policy. I wish all of you productive and enlightening conversations. My colleagues and I are looking forward to an even closer engagement with the EU institutions and stakeholders. Thank you very much, goodbye und auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you, and I would now like to invite our three MEPs to the floor, Mr. Vilanisto, representing the Greens for Finland, Ms. Anna-Michela Simokopoulou from the EPP from Greece, and Ms. Tevetelina Penkova from Bulgaria for the SND. Please take the floor, and welcome to this beautiful location. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Letta and his report gave us a lot to dive into, and we'll do that in right a second. But first, I wanted to take back a step about this debate. The bloc is facing a lot of challenges: climate change, defense, competitiveness, democracy. How important is it that the EU puts its political attention and its money into this specific debate to make Europe more competitive? Miss, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, good afternoon, and obviously I think it's a key time to have this debate, and it's very important that we realize in Europe that we are not competing with each other, because often in Europe when we make decisions on industrial policy, the member states are very much comparing themselves to each other, and then we have the state aid competition that is kind of run out of hand in the last few years, while at the same time the US and the Chinese are investing very heavily on the green transition. I would also like to say that some are making this argument that there is less focus on competitiveness if you do the Green Deal. But if you look at the GDP growth in Europe, 30% of it has been related to the Green Deal by the estimates of International Energy Agency. Globally, it has been 10%. So we are world leaders on the green transition, and that's an industrial strength that we need to widen and broaden. So decarbonization should be at the core of the strategy, and also circularity. Like actually our fourth speaker here from the BMW said, that we have to combine circularity, the Green Deal, the climate ambition, with a focus on competitiveness and making sure that it's actually European industries that are doing the transition. And publicly, we will need a lot of spending on infrastructure, electrification, renewables that makes it possible, but most of the investment will come from the private sector.
And we'll get to that tension between the green and the competitiveness in a second, and whether there is a tension. Mr. Simakopoulos, why having this debate now? Why is it so important?
Had it much sooner. So for those of us who have been talking about the fact that, Europe is in this pressured environment geopolitically where you're being pressured from both sides, from what's going on with China to what's going on with the United States, this is a welcome moment where this is becoming a political priority, and we're talking about the industrial deal. And I know you said, Barbara, that we're going to get into whether there's a tension or not, but I can tell you for sure as an MEP that people don't care if you call it Green Deal, if you call it industrial deal. People care about getting a good deal, and a good deal for them. And in the geopolitical, they understand that there's issues in the world. Our union was always about two things, peace and prosperity. And we did that through scale and through unity. And people understand that we're in a tough spot. They understand that there's two wars going on that are getting closer. They understand inflation. They understand high energy prices. And I can tell you industry certainly understands that they're paying double for their energy prices, whereas in the States it's only 30% more. Mm-hmm. So I know we'll get into these pressures, but the bottom line is it's about time.
Mrs. Penkova, you agree?
I don't think this debate is happening now. It has always been ongoing. But I think when we're speaking before about strategic autonomy, we were not very fair in terms of the definition of what it means. It actually means that we have to produce quite a lot within the European Union. And that hasn't been the case in the last few decades. So I think we are on the right path now I'm just going to give an example about one of the last legislations we're going to be accepting in this mandate of the European Parliament, the Net Zero Industry Act, which in reality is a policy for reindustrialization of Europe. So what we're trying to do now is to repair some of the mistakes we have done in the past and bring back some of the production capacities in the EU. But to make this successful, the first thing we need to answer, of course, is what are the competitive advantages of each one of the member states? Mm. Because it seems that one size doesn't fit all. We cannot apply the same policies to Denmark, France, Germany, Bulgaria, simply because each one of those countries has expertise in different fields of the industrial development and has different critical raw materials available. So the first step we need to do in the next, of course, I agree, we call it Green Deal, we call it industrial plan, but we need a proper industrial plan, not a strategy, a plan with set targets and deadlines. Before we go to that step, we really need to look at the map of the EU and to identify the strengths of each one of the member states. And the common weakness of all of us would be the lack of labor force, both qualified and for every type of the industrial project, we're going to be lacking labor force at the moment. And this is the feedback coming from the industry. Mm. So this is a common European issue we have to resolve. And the one which is very country and member state specific is to identify the strengths, the critical raw materials, the expertise, what types of industries could be developed in each part of Europe. Because if you want to have a competitive common market, we should be working like a whole organism. We shouldn't be competing among each other.
Okay, and that's exactly what Mrs. Letta's report is about, right? About deepening the single market. It is a long report. I hope that you had a chance to already go through it, or at least through the executive summary. The thing with these reports is that often everyone cherry picks a little bit out of it, what they find important, right? And going through it, also in the recommendations out of the report, which are the cherries that you would pick out of it? What was for you the key takeaway or the key recommendation?
If I start, I think he has a point on broadening the single market in different sectors, and the energy markets is one where we have a very national energy systems. I come from Finland, a country that is in the Nordic electricity market. It's the most well-functioning electricity market globally, and it's quite market-based. We need to have a proper price signal for carbon, and ETS is working well. And when it's working well, then we need to promote markets to have a good price for investment into renewables and new solutions. So we will need to look at also opening up those markets where renewables have not been scaled up, and where there has been a kind of like the national policy makers have preferred one solution to promote and then been stopping others or something like that. So I think we need to focus on a proper price signal, and then opening up the markets also, like grids and interconnections between states. And that is also what he proposes, that more international European-wide cooperation on spending on grids, and that is something I very much support. The other aspect which I support very much is the idea to do something about the state aid competition. Letta is actually in his final report less ambitious on this than on maybe somebody thought of the discussion, and I think this will continue in the Draghi report as well. But we need to do something about, we can't have 27 different industrial policies with different subsidy schemes that are also eroding European competitiveness to external actors if we are using public money unwisely, not for the best possible results. So I think excellence should be a focus on public spending, and it would be better to do it with an EU-wide policy instead of state aids nationally. He makes a solution here that state aid would be coupled with EU spending, and some of the state aid would be taxed to EU level. I don't know how that would be feasible in practice, but something needs to be done with the state aid competition. I think that's clear, and I think this is maybe not as ambitious as we need. Maybe
to pick up on that specifically on state aid competition, because neither of you come from France, Germany, the bigger EU countries. Do you agree when it comes to state aid that we really have to rethink that, and maybe also the way that the Commission at this point looks at merger and acquisition, at state aid policy? I saw you nodding earlier, Ms. Pengula.
To be honest, I would have probably spoken about the same part of Mr. Letta's report. Again, giving an example from the real-life legislative process within the EU, again, the Net Zero Industry Act. Initially, from the Commission proposal, the main funding capacity that was included in this reindustrialization policy for the EU was to rely on state aid. And of course, we did oppose that in the European Parliament, and we had to change that simply because it's not sufficient enough to give opportunities only to the big member states. So definitely we should rethink that policy and have a more progressive expansion of the EU funding across all the member states if we want to achieve the performance we are looking at. Otherwise, it's just going to be like two different speeds for Europe, which is not something that either of us is aiming at, I hope.
Okay. You agree? Well, from the Letta report, I have three main concepts, and they all start from the letter S. So the first thing is that the overall objective seems to be some form of security. Security, whether we're talking about economic security, whether we're talking about defense. The second is scale. That's our comparative advantage, and that's what we need to use to overcome our problems. And the third one is state aid, which we just discussed. And I'm from a small state. I'm from Greece, even though I don't sound like it. I'm and Greece is a country that is described sometimes as fiscally challenged. So I welcome the suggestion for state aid, relaxation of state aid rules, as long as there is cohesion, which basically means what he describes as we used to call it a sovereignty fund until he calls it a state aid fund, which is fine as long as it has a threshold. Because my understanding is that, you get to relax your state aid rules, you get to give state aid, but then you have to put money in some sort of a fund. So there has to obviously be a threshold, or else smaller states will be even more fiscally challenged. But generally speaking, I welcome that idea, and I agree with my esteemed colleagues.
Do you feel that there's enough political will among the 27 to look at the current state aid policy and to change it in the way that any of, as you said, Mr. Letta doesn't go as far as some of you would like? Is there a momentum to change this?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, this reminds me of post-COVID times. I mean, this is really now challenging. I don't know. You saw Podesta today announced that's the U.S. envoy. He announced that they're doing a task force, a climate and trade task force, in order to deal with what he calls carbon dumping. This is going to just add more pressure to us. I know we're going to talk about the electric vehicles market, but I mean, this will really add pressure because we're going to have even more in the EU. There'll be a pull effect from this. So I think it's very critical that we go ahead and allow ourselves to provide the financing that is necessary, and that means relaxation of state rules and money. Okay. I mean, the US with the IRA, they've put their money where their mouth is. Yep. We have to do the same.
Let's build on the financing issue, right? Because you can feel that momentum that, as you say, the challenge is awaiting us. We need more financing, whether it comes from private funds, whether it comes from public funds. European leaders discussed this very issue today. We, as Politico, would like to say, they fought over it. The diplomats would say they've discussed it. When it comes to financing the capital markets union, the defense thing, the defense bonds, what is for you and your parties leading up to these elections, European elections in June? What is the key thing when we talk about financing? We can change the other way around. Maybe you can start.
Well, as I said already, in terms of the industrial policy that's coming ahead of us, this is definitely one of the main priorities, because below that we are speaking about more quality job, better paid jobs. I'm not gonna comment much on the defense policy or the funding on that side, of course, because I think there is still quite a strong national bias depending on the member states here. But if we want to build a strong economy, a competitive one, I think we should really focus on the industry and that side rather than anything else at the moment.
Okay.
Well, I think own resources for EU is one key solution here that can solve a lot of the puzzle, because member states don't want to have new funds where they will need to spend money on always with separate decisions on EU level, or then have EU level loaning, because that's always in the frugal countries. I'm coming from Finland, not super frugal myself as a green, but from a context where you understand the thinking. And I think it's important that we create own resources for EU, so that ETS revenues would go mainly to the EU budget, and then that we would have the kind of possibilities for fiscal policies at the EU level, also for different kind of economic upturns and downturns, because we need that momentum. And then if you think about, back to the previous question, whether there is interest to solve the state aid problems, I think the strongest element for EU growth still is the single market. And we can use it also for, as a green politician, for decarbonization and being very forerunner on these issues. But we then need to have a common European industrial policy as well. We can't manage with 27 different industrial policies when our competitors, China and the US, are having one single one. So I think own resources will help a lot in achieving EU-level spending that should have the same philosophy as Horizon Europe on research spending, that it's based on excellence and quality. Obviously, there will be also a cohesion aspect, but there we can use also the existing cohesion money better to promote also growth and social inclusion in the transition.
Okay. Yes, maybe go ahead.
Just to add something, because quite often when we speak about that, we're not completely honest, because there is a lot of money in Europe, public and private. There is a problem with the right and timely investment of those money. I'm just going to give one simple example in an RRF facility. This has been one of the success of the Commission and the European Parliament for this mandate.
The recovery and resilience.
Exactly. Yeah. But in terms of investment and deployment of the funding available in that facility, is far away from satisfactory at the moment if we look at it. It's about 1/3 and we're almost at the end of the deadlines for the projects.
2026, yeah.
Exactly. So it seems that either the rules are too complicated or there is no enough administrative and technical capacities in the member states to follow all those rules. And this is a problem, and this is one of the key messages also from the central bankers, especially central bankers in Europe. I mean, especially during the peaks of the inflationary pressure, they were saying that Europe is sitting on money and we're not investing them properly. So it's not the lack of funds, it's the way we're not putting them into use.
And how can we change
that? It's also very complicated in Europe.
Exactly, so those are the rules and everything. So we either have to simplify them or really have a very focused strategic and industrial policy which is easy to follow with the right technologies, with the right production capacities that needs to be developed. Because it seemed that it should be presented in a very simple and easy to put into reality way for the member states. Because the problem is not that there is not enough money, it's just not being used properly or at all.
Okay. You agree? Is that part of the solution?
That's part of the solution, but take the example of critical raw materials, which the report also touches on. We now have a critical raw materials fund in Germany, we have a critical raw material funds in France, we have a critical raw materials fund in Italy. Now, these critical raw materials, as you all know, are the basis of at the base of our dual transition, digital and green. 90% are produced in China. China also controls, for electric vehicles, pretty much the battery supply chain. And we need to make investments. That's why we did the Critical Raw Materials Act, which is a wonderful act. It has ambitious targets, 10% of mining projects in the EU. It has all these targets, but there's no money attached to it. And there's many projects, I think I heard 70 today, in the pipeline, but if there's no fresh money for these projects, how are they supposed to happen? How are we supposed to meet these targets? I'm bringing a very specific example. So now, if you're asking me if realistically, I'm very hopeful that, the council is going to agree to this in the near future. I'm not hopeful, but at the same time, I feel like I have to be hopeful because this is another existential moment, and it has to be treated as such. So even if a group of them would agree to something, even that would be welcome at this point.
One specific question on critical raw materials that we had through Slido from Simon, who works at Seas at Risk. On critical raw materials, he's asking how Europe can ensure that the industry agenda does not mean increasing the demand or extracting more critical raw materials, and rather to boost our circular economy. Yeah, maybe go.
Sure. Well, at the moment, we're struggling to get this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like, I think it's, there's very few. I think only copper, we're getting a certain percentage of it from recycling. But certainly those things are not mutually exclusive, Barbara. Certainly we want to, like aluminium is something that is infinitely recyclable. But that means we need to build up our recycling capacity, and that's something that we're behind on also. So it's a puzzle, and these are pieces that make the big picture.
I think the key here is also that circularity means high level of a value chain, that we have more added value products and we have that kind of production capacity in Europe. This is what we should do and spend on. I was a bit critical of the Critical Raw Materials Act because it has a bit of a tendency to sideline environmental rules and hastening projects at the cost of the environment. Coming from Finland, we have a lot of those mining projects in Finland. I do understand that we need many of those if we can solve the environmental issues, but we also need to have the best solutions in Europe in place also for the purification technologies, and we can sell that globally as well. So I mean, having a high standard on the environment for mining is also a part of European competitiveness, because that is technology that the others want as well. And the more we have resource efficiency, circularity, the more we think about also recycling, like you mentioned in aluminium, like in steel, that we can have a higher proportion of. I've spoken with the industry, and some of them say that we will need quite soon also European targets or in procurements that 20% of the product needs to be of recycled material, for example, in metals. European industries can do those kind of solutions. We can have carbon-free steel production and also recycled steel production in Europe faster than anybody else. So if we also demand those when we make procurement, then we can make sure that it's a kind of like a good kind of protectionism, that we can produce it, everybody else happy to join if you can do that, but we have competitive edge in these technologies. So I think circularity needs to be stronger implemented in the Critical Raw Materials Act when it's been practiced, because this was kind of like, for some it's in, and for some it's more about just getting more resources, and we need to have both in.
And maybe staying on the green team, we talked in the beginning a little bit about these possible tensions between the fighting climate change, making sure that Europe remains competitive. When we look forward to the next legislative cycle, we had the start of the EPP campaign with Commission President von der Leyen talking much less about the Green Deal, talking more about defense competitiveness. Does that mean that we're losing our climate agenda when it comes to the EPP? And how do we fit it with this agenda?
No, just like mining projects can have high environmental standards, and so it's not mutually exclusive that you will protect the environment and mine. The same way you can have a robust industrial policy that enforces competitiveness, and you don't have to give up your goals and your aspirations and the high level of expectations and of targets that you have in the Green Deal. But you do have to be realistic. This transition has a cost, and the question is, who pays the price? That's why you see angry farmers. That's why you see angry people, because they're paying the price. So when and what's happened now is, it's like a political pendulum. In the previous legislature, it went so far toward the Green Deal that now it feels like it has to go in the other direction. But what we're all looking for is balance, and I think that we can achieve balance. And certainly the EPP is in favor of both the being ambitious in terms of our targets for the Green Deal, but at the same time making sure that we keep our industry alive. And that is going to take a plan and money.
And can you finance both?
They're both part of the same thing. They're both part of the same thing. They're both about prosperity, and you can't ignore one or the other, but you can't go to extremes either way. I don't think we're in any danger of going to extremes in terms of finding new money for projects.
And if I may say, I don't think we are going to extremes to keep a livable planet and its ecosystems intact. It's not extremes to try to save that as well. So, but we have to, for me, I think it's looking at the scale of Green Deal investments. The business committee in Finland says that this is the chance for Finland to actually increase its industrialization. If we get more wind power, also wind power on seas, we have a possibility to produce a lot of green hydrogen. We can electrify industrial production, be fossil-free, and we can invite more industries to Finland based on the Green Deal. So we have to be adamant in Europe about that our competitiveness is about decarbonization and being better in implementing it and being faster, and then also have not just think about our footprint in Europe, but also our handprint elsewhere, that we can export that knowledge and technology and those industries, carbon-free steel, for example, to the rest of the world and have a global impact.
In the S&D program and in the campaign, we see that the Green Deal is still very, very prominent. S&D is very much still a defender of the Green Deal. How do you look at this tension? And also specifically coming from Bulgaria, where a lot of the times we're talking about the new industries and the green transition. When you look at your industry back home and how they are handling the green transition, is there sometimes a tension between what you hear here in Brussels and what you hear back home?
Of course, I think that's not the situation only in my member states. In quite a few, there must have been a lot of question in terms of the way the Green Deal was presented and communicated. But the first fair question, again, that we need to answer ourselves is the Green Deal and the policies related to the changes in the industrial production and in the energy production and consumption is why we needed to do this. And please allow me to be bluntly honest, but this was not based on ideology or just saving the environment. This was also driven by some economic factors, such as the scarcity of certain raw materials. So the overconsumption, the scarcity of raw materials, those were also quite significant driving factors behind the policies we've done. So I think we need to continue follow that agenda because we've achieved a lot. Like if we look at the energy segment, we've achieved a lot in terms of quite significant investment in renewables all across Europe. Before it was probably distributed in certain parts, now you have it everywhere. However, we are again at the border of overstepping in terms of overproduction of energy that could not be used at the moment from certain renewable sources. So nothing should be done to the extreme. And that's why the next policy for the EU in terms of energy policy is going to be focused and related to the connectivity. So how can we transport and transmit that energy, especially on the horizon north to south and the other way around? Mm-hmm. So, and this is again part of the Green Deal. We can put any other name, but this is a way to produce clean energy, to have clean and more sustainable economy, and again, always be fair about the reasons why we've done that. Like a lot of the resources were scarce in Europe, and at some point we're not going to be able to import those at a cheaper price, and it's not good for our economy. And for various reasons, that there are countries that we were importing them from until now, they're going to start using them themselves. So this was a very good plan for Europe to be prepared for its economic autonomy. Mm-hmm. And we should keep on following that, but in the practical and real terms, of course, with the first priority to defend our consumers, households and industry. Yeah, okay, and at this point, if you allow me, I'm trying to catch a plane.
I was going to say, we thank you for your intervention, and please excuse yourself from the stage, and we will continue. Please give her applause before she has to catch her plane. On the US side, we have talked here in Brussels a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act, mm-hmm. about how the US is handling to make sure that its industry remains competitive. How much should we copy that US rule book? How much should we do it different? And do you feel that when looking from the EU side to the US on the economic front, that we're facing a kind of paradigm shift?
Yes and no, but look, my learned colleague just talked about the fact that we're looking for strategic autonomy. Mm-hmm. Now, that was open strategic autonomy was a lovely Brussels bubble buzzword that made everybody happy, those who wanted us to open up to the world and those who wanted us to protect ourselves. It was that kind of a compromise. But because I couldn't rationalize that in my head, I remembered that autonomy is a Greek word. It's a Greek word, autonomia. It comes from aftos, which means self, and nomos, which means law. So literally what it means is to make your own rules. The problem is we're very good at doing that in Brussels. Sometimes we even make conflicting rules, which drives people crazy. But we're very good at that. And then we have the Brussels effect. We export our rules because of our scale. That's all wonderful. But not everybody is playing by the rules. That's the problem. China is certainly not playing by the international rules, even though we have made them a part of the world order and of all the organizations, WTO being one, for example. So the US is reacting to that, in various ways. In the case of electric vehicles, they've put 37.5% of 27.5% tariffs, whereas we're now starting an anti-subsidy probe in the electric vehicle market in China, and that may result in 18 months after the provisional period goes by, may result in a 10% tariff. What does that mean? That means we're going to get flooded with even more if we don't work with the U.S. on this topic, like we are working on on steel. Then what's going to happen?
You think the EV investigation is a bad idea?
No, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. It's just not going to, if the U.S. is being more forceful on that front than we are, it's going to have a pull effect, and we're going to end up getting more cars than the U.S. does. So it's going to make things worse for us. Or if they do what Podesta said today, which is this trade and trade and climate task force, it's going to make things worse for us. So what do we need to do? We need to work with like-minded partners, and the U.S. is a like-minded partner. We're not going to still. I believe it is still. In any case, I mean, we're not doing very well in that track record. I mean, as you know, I was vice chair of INTA during this term. And
the Parliament's Trade Committee.
The Parliament's Trade Committee. And we barely did any trade deals. And I'm talking about with like-minded partners. I mean, if we can't do a deal with Australia, then who can we do a deal with? I mean,
New Zealand.
Fine. Fine.
How do you look at this, the U.S. perspective?
Well, I think it's a two-sided coin. I mean, obviously, again, Finland joined NATO. We understand that in the current geopolitical context, but with Russia and authoritarianism on the rise, it's in the interest of Europe to keep Americans as close to us as possible and try to also make them interested in security of Europe, but also in trading with us. So we need to have that in mind. At the same time, I think it's strategic autonomy and having a European industrial policy means that we want to have enough knowledge on all key high-tech areas that we can have growth in Europe, but we can have a certain amount of independence from all actors, including not being too dependent on the big tech or the Americans. And we still have the single market, which is the sole place where we can still actually have some decent rules for AI use and promote human rights and the rights of individuals over a future where you have the totalitarian Chinese police state controlling every information that there is of us online, and then we have the big tech in the US, which is not that well regulated. So I think Europe has to step up in this as well and be proud of what we can do, and we have areas where we can be strong, like for example industrial data. It should be part of industrial politics that we have a European policy of supporting, pushing for 6G, automatization, AI, being a world leader on using industrial data to have competitive edge in this area when we don't have that on the platforms or in digital platforms. So we should, compete, but still be friendly with the US.
Which is a challenge. Let me take another question from the audience, from Valentin, from the Renewable Energy Association. Innovation had and will be one of the main drivers of EU competitiveness. How can the bloc retain its champions without a strategy to de-risk private investment?
That's a good question. Let me take an example. Yes, innovation is one of our strong points, and certainly we need to foster it. But let me take an example again from the critical raw materials. China has now imposed export controls on gallium. Now, I didn't know what gallium is either, but now I know that gallium comes from bauxite, and it comes from bauxite when you're making aluminium. And why do I know this? Because we make aluminium in Greece, and because it is possible, apparently, according to a cost-benefit analysis done, it is possible that from the amount of aluminium that is made in Greece and the bauxite we could have enough gallium to cover the needs of Europe and to export some. So then we wouldn't be beholden to the Chinese. But what if the Chinese, so we want an investment. Fine, that investment has the following risk. What is the risk? the risk is that once we make this investment, then gallium starts flooding in from China again. And so then the person who's made this investment goes broke. So we need to de-risk the investment. How do we do that? There's ways to do it. One is you can, open up a program, you can have a fund, and you can give money to the investment, or you can make sure that they're guaranteed that they're going to sell gallium at a certain price. I know all these things sound bad for people who are, very liberal, and I'm in that category, but I don't see any other way for it to be done. So de-risking private financing has got to be part of the plan, is the answer, I think, to the question.
I think this is also key in many of the Green Deal investments, that we have these bottlenecks in Europe. For example, we have huge possibilities to have maritime wind power, green hydrogen, industrial carbon-free production, and then there will be also buyers who want to buy those kind of products. But currently in the private sector, there's so much public infrastructure related to that, and somebody needs to make the first risk that, BMW or somebody else says that we buy the carbon-free steel, and then the change starts to happen. But if there is no EU-level push for that, so hydrogen bank and these kind of solutions where EU is pushing for these clusters to happen, it may be that they are not happening because there is too much risk for an individual actor to be involved, because one company cannot create the whole cluster themselves. So in these kind of places, we need to insert public financing. I think that's the key for the EU's industrial policy, to use public money to make sure that these industrial complexes happen in Europe and not elsewhere. And China is the main competitor here, because they do that. The Americans do it.
Linked to China, one of the other Brussels buzzwords in this field is economic security, something that also comes up in the report. We had a question on it as well. How far should we go when it comes to economic security, and how do you look at the work of the Commission done so far? Also looking forward to the next term when next steps will follow on this.
Please.
Sorry, what was the question?
Economic security.
How far should we go?
How far should we go?
I think we should realize also that I have a background of being a foreign policy researcher, actually, and I did my master's thesis 20 years ago on how Russia uses energy as a tool of geopolitics. So I've been warning about this for 20 years. 10 years ago, I left the Finnish government because of a Russian investment into a nuclear plant in Finland, and the rest of the government thought that I was too Russophobic or something like that. I found it a bit distasteful, but now many people do understand that we had a point. But I think what Europe has been very, very naive about is not to realize that especially authoritarian states do everything with their own self-interest at the core. So like in Russia, Russia's main goal is to be strategically promoting Russian states' interest everywhere. Now we understand, everybody with the war in Ukraine, that this is how they operate. But then when it comes to the question of economic security and European more broadly, that we are not geopolitically naive. So I think we need to understand that we have to be economically solid and not dependent on any, especially authoritarian states, in a way where they can use that leverage against us geopolitically. And sometimes that means that we also need to invest, and sometimes it means that we need to take risks, but still it means that we have to have an economy that is, well, in lack of a better word, is resilient. I think the biggest risk is that we misunderstand frugal economics and trying to address deficits as the main goal of economic policy, instead of understanding that there is this bigger geopolitical world where we are living, that economic security is also trying to counteract that geopolitical pressure from others, which sometimes means spending money.
I think now we're realizing it, but maybe a little bit too late.
I guess the question was, how far should we go? Yeah. I guess as far as we can, or as far as necessary. Even
if industry will sometimes push back because it's not in their competitiveness interest in the short term?
there's days when I feel like we're stuck in this post-war paradigm of, oh, we beat the West, beat the communists, and we can't get out of this and see that the practicalities of the world around us make it necessary for us to huddle together and push forward. Mm-hmm. And I think the Letta report, by the way, is the plan for us to be up here until he arrives?
I'm letting you go in a couple of minutes. Don't worry, don't worry.
Not that I mind being an opening act for the... yeah, but I was just wondering if, I should be checking the door. But I think that this report, which, okay, it's a long report, like you said. I think this report will give us lots of food for thought, lots of good ideas, and I hope that these ideas go as far as they can. Okay.
With that, I would like to thank you for your contributions. Mr. Letta is on his way, so I am asking for a little bit more of your patience. In the meanwhile, I would like to welcome my colleague, Giovanna Fagionato, who is our competition reporter, and who has been covering this issue the entire week. So I will let her on stage. I will let you take your seats again. Thank you very much. I thank all of you for your patience. I know a lot of you had a long day, including us at the European Council, but we do look forward to hearing from Mr. Letta himself. In the meanwhile, Giovanna, because you've talked to Mr. Letta this week, you've interviewed him, you've read through the entire report.
Yes.
How bold is the report? How far does it go?
I think the idea is that it's a mix of very ambitious proposal and also very feasible proposal. It's really a mix because Letta, basically I've been covering the report, the process that leads to the release of the report over the last 9 months. And from the very beginning, Letta said that it was a war of some very solid political realities. The first one is that we cannot rely on public money, for example, or better, we cannot rely on public only on public money because there is not a political will to do that. So from the very beginning, he had in mind a political strategy, and the political strategy is basically we have to build up a private capital pillar to fund all our goals, and only with that we can have some, for example, the northern states, the frugals, on board. So yes, I would say that it's a mix. I agree with the Green lawmaker. Basically, is not so ambitious on state aid, but again, it was a war of that because he said many times that the internal race that we saw, over the recent, exactly, it was the elephant in the room. He got feedback from a lot of different points of view on that, and he tried to find a sort of balance, a very difficult balance, and also in some way a little bit vague.
A real politician.
Yeah.
How does this report compare to the report that we're still waiting for from one of the other former Italian prime ministers, Mario Draghi? How are they linked?
Letta told us that there are some issues that are really, the same, some proposals that are really the same because it's common sense. But we know that they didn't compare their notes, but they discuss about the report. I would say that there is a big difference Letta say that his report is a sort of collective exercise. He met hundreds of people. Yeah, I visited more than 30 countries because he visited also the United States. Yeah.
It's a dream job, basically.
Yeah. But I think that Draghi could be more, I don't know, could be more brave. Not because Letta is trying to find a feasible compromise. I think the style is a little bit different.
And taking a step back, because you cover the EU's competition policy for us at Politico, if you look at the discussions now, also looking forward to the next European Commission, Vestager star that has been declining, how many changes should we expect in the EU's competition policy towards the next term?
Oh, this is a
crystal ball.
Yeah, but this is a big issue because there is a very strong push for more industrial policy, but could be everything. But basically, both Letta and Draghi are backing the calls from the industry, from the businesses, to really go ahead with the consolidations in some sectors. And the telecom sector is really, I mean, the best example. Yeah, so there is a strong tension between the approach, the current approach of DG Comp and the industrial policy goals for the next term.
And walk us through that. What would change, for example, in the telecom policy, and how is that symbolic for the bigger competition policy?
I mean, Letta recommends to take in account Europe as the relevant market, for example, for the telecom industry. It's not so clear, but it recalls something that we already heard many times. So basically, we have to take into account if our businesses are competing globally with competitors from, for example, in the US or in China, etc. So if you change the relevant market, also the review, the competition rules and the competition review change completely, you know?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Giovanna. I'm letting you go because Mr. Letta has arrived. Give her a big applause for doing this so spontaneous. And I invite Mr. Letta to the stage. He's here, right? Okay.
How are you?
How are you?
Fine.
You've had a calm day at the office?
Yes. But now it seems like Friday evening.
We will get you a drink afterwards. Thank you so much for joining us. You come straight for the European Council. How was it? How are the reactions? How was the feedback that you got from the European leaders and from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen?
The environment was positive and the reactions were good. The mood was, I think, positive. Of course, they spent, as usual, a lot of time to the details of the text. And the text is always one of the most complicated parts of a European Council. But, of course, I didn't attend the Council until the end. I just attended the Council this morning in the 2 hours where we discussed about my report. But I can tell you that the environment was very friendly, no blood. It was.
That was after you left. The question looming over this a little bit, also potentially the report from Draghi, what will happen with it? In 2010, we had the report by Mario Monti, another Italian, about a new strategy for the single market. How do you know that this does not risk ending up somewhere in a closet at the Berlaymont?
Frankly speaking, I don't know, so I have no answer. I can have, I would say, a wish, and the wish. You know, I am good friend of Mario Monti, and I admire Mario Monti very much. So this is why Mario was one of the first, really the first people I met when I started this journey. We were in first days of September, and we met in Italy. The place was not bad because we were in the Como Lake, so it was good. And we had a very good first discussion. He gave me a lot of suggestions, and I admire very much the work he did in 2010, 9 and 10 on the report. But I found, reading his report, and you can do the same, you can have the same exercise. Reading Monti's report, you find today many topics are still there. This is, I think, the reason why today it is absolutely necessary to move and to avoid stops or slowing down, because until now, we wasted a lot of time. And I think it is absolutely necessary to go ahead and to be able on some of these topics to have results. I have to say, I'm more optimistic now than yesterday, for the very simple reason that the conclusions of today's European Council are a first step that is written in the report, if I may say. And if I have to add one conclusion to that, is the fact that the Capital Markets Union, maybe I'm biased on that, or maybe I'm too simplistic, but my interpretation of what happened on the Capital Markets Union is, first of all, the Capital Markets Union idea was, the big mission was a political mission. Yep. It was not a technical one. And the political mission at that time was to keep the UK on board. We were in 14, 15. It was immediately before the referendum, and we had the feeling at that time that it was necessary to engage the UK on a fundamental topic, that was to have London aside with Brussels and Strasbourg and Luxembourg and Frankfurt, the fifth capitals of the European institutions, and London as capital of the Capital Markets Union. Then Brexit happened. My feeling, maybe I'm wrong, but my feeling is that after Brexit, Capital Markets Union didn't find the high motivation, the high purpose to mobilize political energies. And it is not easy for political leaders to put their face aside to finance. It is not very sexy in relationship with voters and the rest. So at the end of the day, the true step today, the true achievement today, is to move from the Capital Markets Union as it was before, an idea that we are integrating the financial services for a much bigger purpose, that is to finance the transition and to finance one of the biggest needs the European Union has today, because the discussion this morning was exactly on that.
And you call it in your report turning it into the Savings and Investments Union. Is that more than a rebranding to give it a fresh start? Is it really a different idea? And can you walk us through it?
It is a different idea, first of all, because we have savings at the very heart of that. And frankly speaking, the discussion about savings wasn't in the past a discussion like it is today. And I think today the big preoccupation, big worry we had in the discussion was about this topic of the this famous 300 billion euros savings from the European savers going to the US and not being able to feed the European economy. That is today. So I think it's a step. It's an important step. And the other big step is the other name, investments. So the point is, finance is a leverage to do something important for the rest of the European Union and for the citizens. I have to say, I see there a move, an important move, an important step. I don't know if it will be a success, but it's not my job, if I may say. My job was to try to invent a new journey, a new track, a new formula, a new, what I said to the leaders this morning, it was that you asked me this report, and this report is a very political report.
Yep.
It is a political report because I try to find the way to identify the new mobilizers of political energy to get the results. Because we don't have COVID, and Putin is not enough. Maybe we will have Trump. Trump is a great mobilizer of federalistic energy, but I don't want to have this kind of mobilizer, so it's not my wish. So I think my job was to find positive mobilizers of political energy to move towards a more integrated Europe, and not just, I would say, catastrophic, scaring events like COVID or like the war or like Putin. And I strongly believe this is the core today. How to find these mobilizers of political energy to convince leaders that it is better to leave one step to have a gain, a bigger gain, a bigger collective gain. This is, I think, the main part of the exercise, and that was the 2 hours discussions we had today was exactly on that. And I have to say also my tour of the capitals was exactly on this point, in a bilateral but also in a multilateral way.
A second topic that I'd like to address and that we've talked about before you were able to join us is the EU's competition policy. How much do we need to rewrite the competition rule book? For example, the way that EU weighs up mergers and acquisitions. And already from within the DuCamp, we're hearing some grumbles about your report. How far are you proposing to go when it comes specifically to how the EU is now looking at competition policy?
I was tasked to write a report credible and pragmatic, realistic, not to write a dreams book. I'm very good in writing dreams book, so I would. But I think now there's a problem of timing. We need to be very fast.
Yep.
In having some achievements and some steps. So my point on that is that I don't think I have the power or the strength to change the competition rules. I think, and this is my report, I have the possibility to, I would say, to underline some missions, steps, realizations, achievements where we can modify one of the most important part of the competition rule, that is the relevant market. I heard you were discussing that before. And I think this is the main topic, because if we think that on financial markets, on telecom, the relevant market until now was the national one. It is clear that you can't ask Olivier Gersin to invent new rules. He applies the rules to the present fragmentation in 27 markets. I think the most important part is to move from 27 to 1. Because if we move from 27 to 1, we are able then to apply the competition rules to a much bigger relevant market. And I think this is the aim of my report. On telecom, I saw that the white paper of the Commission goes in a similar direction. I'm very happy because I have to say I had very good conversations with Verstager and Breton in these months, in these 8 months. I trust them very much, and I think that maybe this kind of mission can be fulfilled.
Do we need more European champions?
I think we need a much bigger relevant market, and then the market will create the conditions to have or bigger champions or others. It is not my job to build up a European champion. I think My job was to create the condition to recuperate what we didn't do 39 years ago. Because 39 years ago, we created the single market, but you know the story. 10, because they were 10 at that time, member states told the law, yes, but energy, telecom, financial markets, it's our business, it's not your business. And I think if you give a look to the word of 85, maybe it was understandable to have this kind of decision, because the word of 25, or of 85, and my report starts with this description that I heard from the Lord himself. He told me, Soviet Union, European communities, 2 Germanys, China and India, less than 5% of world GDP. So we were really in another world. And in that world, the 4 biggest European countries were among the 7 most important economically countries in the world. Today we are in a completely different situation, and I think the need to move from the national dimension to the European dimension is the big mission of my report, but I understand that it is also what Draghi is doing, because what he said in La Hulpe and what we are discussing bilaterally goes exactly in the same direction. You know, I this morning to the Prime Minister, I immediately said, I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want Europe as a copy of the US. Europe is Europe. And Europe is a fantastic mix between small and big. And we have to keep this mix because it's our richness, our variety, our strength. The key point is that the small of yesterday is the small of today, and it will be the same small of tomorrow. It is the big of yesterday, today, and tomorrow that is changing. And we need a big, bigger, because the world has changed. Because China and India today are not China and India of 39 years ago. And we are, I think, losing ground, losing time, and we need to be, I think, not only effective, but very fast. I would like to underline that it's not to have speed as the first term of the subtitle of the report is a clear indication. I think speed means that we have no more time.
One of the recommendations that you also make is to pool national subsidies to make sure that certain quota of national state aid is spent on pan-European projects only. Already we heard some countries worrying about this, that this can transform into some kind of compulsory contribution to a project. They're calling it a state aid tax. What is your response to those comments?
My response is that the proposal, you know, I presented a toolbox, a big toolbox, with many, many different tools. Then it is in the hands of the member states to decide. What is clear in my mind is the following point. We had, before COVID, a budget, and the European budget was very poor. We know very well. Then we had COVID, the war, the energy crisis, the enlargement, the need to have a different Europe. We are all aware, and this morning it was clear in the Council that it is impossible to satisfy these needs with the budget of pre-COVID. And because today we are...
Including Hungary?
Sorry?
Including Hungary, everyone is...
He didn't take the floor on this point. The point is, with this budget, pre-COVID, it's impossible to be at the level of these needs. So we need to find other tools. And what I wanted to give the leaders is a set of tools. If you ask me what is, in your view, the final solution, I have to say the final solution is a mix of the different tools, not just a public investment leg or just private money. It is a mix. And when I say a mix, I put also this topic on the state aid in this mix. Because state aid are public, national money, authorized by the European Union, but it is clear that we are in a no-border single market. So if you help your companies within your borders, there are borders and companies on the other side of the border that doesn't exist. So it's a little bit problematic. So my idea is to try to move in the direction of a more European or the Europeanization of this kind of interventions, knowing that state aid are still the exceptions in our system. But they, once again, is a realistic proposal, because visiting all the capitals and the member states, I understood that on this topic there's a conflict among countries, and we have to find solutions. So my report is a way to, how we say, to put solutions on the table, and realistic solutions. Then is, I think, the discussion among the leaders, the Commission, that will decide if these solutions are good, which kind of mix. That's it.
You mentioned earlier the report of Mr. Draghi, right, that we're still awaiting. How much, what's the link? Does it help that this comes first, he comes after? And if I may, you mentioned his speech also this week. Did you feel like it overshadowed your report and the discussion that we had on it?
I see an immediate link between the two, and the immediate link is the fact that to be competitive, we have some conditions. One of the conditions is to integrate the single market. So I see my report as a fundamental condition to be competitive, and this is why my report can be, I think, an interesting, I hope, an important tool in the hands of the member states, but can be an important tool in the hands also on Mario Draghi's elaboration of the report of competitiveness, because there's a clear link between integrating the single market. You know, for instance, to be competitive, how is it possible to be competitive without the single market on the financial markets, or without the single market on telecom, or without the single market or on energy? I decided to put this example of the railways within the report, and I decided to present it also to the leaders this morning, because in my view it is emblematic of today's problem of the single market. Because you know the example I rose is the fact that it's impossible today to move and to join the different capitals in Europe by high-speed train. It's impossible. There's just Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is not the capital. But if you take the capitals, it's impossible to join the capitals. So it is a shame for many reasons. First reason, because we are a small continent. We are not China. We are not a small continent. And second, because we decided to go green. And if we decide to go green, we have to choose train and not plane, for instance. And so the key point is why it doesn't work. High-speed trains are very well working within countries. You can move from Salerno to Torino, from Sevilla to Barcelona, from Aix-en-Provence to Paris, very easily by train. But you can move by high-speed train within the national barriers and the national frontiers that don't exist, but they exist, because you can't join the capitals. So I think it is emblematic. On energy is the same, the interconnections. On the financial market, the same.
We have to wrap up, but we're Politico, so I cannot let you go without the question. You have traveled, as you said, every European country, talked to all of the leaders. Perfect campaign to be European Council President?
No. The answer is very simple. I'm very happy because of this report, and that's it.
And the job is done?
the job is done. Yes, I'm very happy. And I have to say that I think I'm in the good environment to say that. But frankly speaking, after 8 months, visiting 65 cities in Europe, meeting thousands of passionate people from Tallinn to Lagonissi, from Malaga to Dublin, I think Europe is the best continent in the world. It's a fantastic continent.
I think a lot of people... I couldn't agree more with you. I couldn't agree more with you. I would like to thank you for being here after this very busy day for you. I would like to thank all of you for your patience, but I think it was definitely worth listening to Mr. Letta's speech. I would like to also thank our partner, BMW, for making this event possible and say that you can look at our next Politico events, especially our Competitive Europe Week in October, that you don't want to miss. And with that, I wish you a very pleasant evening. Enjoy. Thank you very much.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?